What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me on the YouTube channel. Going to be talking about some shed antlers, clearly, in this video. It's been a while since I've kind of gotten all my antlers out and gone through them. And I figured tonight I'd just talk about them a little bit and go through some of the cool antlers. To me, that's kind of the whole point in collecting shed antlers, is using that as like a way to remember the past, whether it's a deer that you chased, or maybe the one that got away. They all have a pretty unique, a pretty cool story attached to them, but some stand out a little more than others, and I always love hearing people talk about their sheds. So with obviously shed season being upon us, I figured what better way to roll into that than reminiscing on some of the ones that I have and sharing it with you guys. So we're going to do just that. I was actually out tonight anyway doing a little shed hunting and picked one up. So pretty fresh, still has blood on the pedicle there, so you know it's fresh when it's still covered in blood, especially because we've been getting a lot of rain here in Ohio. So that was a cool find this evening. But without further ado, we're gonna just roll into some of these, really in no particular order. I guess maybe I'll start with some of the smaller ones and end with some of the bigger ones. I have a pile of these little spike sheds, which I think is really fascinating. It's always fun to find those because it feels like you probably earned it. These are tough to see with the naked eye, and a lot of times they have their way of hiding themselves. I would assume squirrels and other rodents probably get to these quick also, but I have, dropping them here. I think I have like five little spike sheds. Again, just kind of unique. This one's my favorite. I actually found it right behind my house, and it is just tiny. I mean, it's maybe 3 inches there, but just a little tiny spike buck. These two I actually found on the same trail while I was turkey hunting on a property. This has been probably a decade ago, but they were maybe 100 yards apart, and they're from different deer because one is old, probably from the year prior, and then one is fresh. You can clearly tell that. I don't know if you can in the video, but yeah, same trail, same property, obviously, about 100 yards apart while I was turkey hunting. So, which is probably a good transition into one of the next sheds I'm going to show y'all here. And something worth talking about is that the more time you spend outdoors, the more sheds you're going to find. I do a lot of coyote trapping during the winter, obviously doing a lot of turkey hunting in the spring. I find a ton of what I would call bonus sheds during those other outdoor pursuits just from spending time out there. I've already found 2 sheds this winter, or this spring. It's not quite spring yet, but while I'm running traps, so just spending time out there is a good way to find sheds, especially if you're new and you're learning. This is a kind of an outdoor pursuit that just bridges the gap for us from one season to the next. But if you're getting into it and you're new, just spend time out there. The more miles you cover, the more ground you walk. Obviously, only walk on properties you have permission to be on, but the more ground you walk, the more you're going to find. This was one I found checking coyote traps this year. Would have been a really nice antler, but it's pretty old, and it was chewed up pretty good. I don't think by rodents, I think by tractor. It was buried in a field, and I don't know how I spotted it, but I did, and it's a couple of times broken off there. This property holds some really nice deer. Unfortunately, I can only trap it. I can't hunt it. But I'm hoping maybe one day that'll change because there's some studs on that property. So that was a cool find. A couple more I have sitting in front of me here. They're just little guys, but have a fun story attached to them. I photographed this buck in our food plot one year, and he put on a show in like a winter storm. He was eating pine needles off this pine tree, and snow was falling on him. And it was this year that he had this rack. I found this shed, I think it was March 7th. And then this one I didn't find until April 30th, so the very end of April. And I was mushroom hunting, and I came across his other side. It was chewed up pretty good. So I ended up with the match set, but this one got a little beat up by the rodents, probably the squirrels. So that buck, he blew up into a stud the next year. He put on a ton of inches, was a real wide buck. Was really hoping to catch up with him, but never did see him that season, and he kind of disappeared about November. So I'm guessing one of the neighbors got him, but he was a fun deer to hunt for a couple seasons there. So Here's another match set that I found on the same property, and what's unique about this set, it's a real pretty set. I mean, I think I picked them up, pretty quick, shortly thereafter he dropped them. He has real nice dark bases, really short tines, which is kind of cool. But what I thought was really fascinating about it, they were laying side by side, but this is a deer that I have never, ever seen, and other than the sheds, I don't have any story to tell about this guy. Like, there was no trail cam pictures, there were no sightings. It just is fascinating to me that we run a ton of trail cameras. We're spending a lot of times in the woods, and there's still some that fall through the cracks. And you'll hear a lot of guys talk about that. This is kind of what sold me on it. Like, man, I was monitoring this property pretty heavily with trail cameras, and I never knew this deer existed. Found his set and thought maybe I'd see him the next year. There was nothing that ever resembled this buck. So I don't know where he came from or why he was there, but something Easton says a lot of times when it comes to sheds is, they only have to be somewhere once to find their sheds. I mean, we found them off the road, we found them in ditches. I know guys finding them in the roads. Like, they just have to cross or be somewhere one time, and for whatever reason, and they could lose their antlers at that time. So that's just kind of a cool story attached to that one. Makes you realize that just when you think you know what's out there, you may not. So I mentioned a second ago about deer crossing roads. I've been lucky enough to find a couple of kind of sheds, if you want to call it that, while I've been driving on the road. One of which I thought was a shed, but ended up being from a dead buck that was hit. So I'll pull them out here. This first set I found, I think it was back in 2017. I was on my way back to college. I was on the highway and I looked just out my passenger side window and I thought I saw an antler in the ditch, and I did. Let's see, it would have been, this one here. Just a big left side, big heavy antler. This sucker is dense. Was laying in the ditch, and I ran out and picked it up and thought, oh, cool, a shed. Well, I noticed the base was pretty dinged up. It didn't look like a shed antler. Looked like it broke. So I kind of started putting two and two together and realized that this was off a deer that had been hit by a car. And sure enough, probably 60, 70 yards up the road was a carcass, and this side was still attached. So I was amazed, number one, that a deer this nice someone else hadn't picked up already, but number two, at how far that antler had traveled when it got hit. I mean, driving on a highway, I'm guessing the vehicle was going 60, 70, 80 mile an hour, somewhere in there. And his left side must have just launched, because like I said, he was a good distance away. So we always try to work with our county game warden to get salvage permits if we find deer that are dead on the side of the road, and he usually sends them to us in the mail. So that worked out. Here's a really nice buck. I was not as bright as I am now, which I'm still not very bright, but I had a dog in college and I let him chew a little bit on the brow tine there, which I kind of regret, but that's all right. Still a really pretty set. So, and then kind of keeping that same theme, just about a week ago, I was driving and I saw what I thought was a shed laying in the ditch. I turned around and come to find out it was still attached to the buck's head in a very similar situation, but he only had his left side right here, and the other side was not attached to his head any longer. So I got to looking up and down the ditch, and I found his right side. So same scenario, must have got hit. His one side went flying. This side was still attached, and then on both these, obviously, was able to pop off the other side. So that's pretty interesting. Another nice buck, and I actually know a gentleman that hunts in this area, so he was going to look for trail cam pictures to see if he had any of that deer, which is kind of neat also. But a couple other nice ones here. I found this shed when I was a little bit younger. Was a deer that I was hunting actually behind my folks' house, and I had one encounter with him. Called him across a cornfield, and he was probably 60, 70 yards, ended up circling downwind and getting a little nervous, and that was the last I had ever seen him. But I found his sheds probably about a half mile away from there. I should just say shed, just his one shed. Got chewed on a little bit, but that was just a really nice deer, and I was a young kid just learning how to hunt, so it was a fun chase for him. Was never really in the game. I think I got lucky that night. Had no clue what I was doing. Would hunt the same stand every single sit, but still, it's those memories that is why I love keeping sheds, because it kind of takes you back to that time. So here's another pretty big one. Never did see this deer. Knew he existed. Neighbor had some pictures of him the next year, and he was an absolute giant. Don't know what ended up happening to him, but this was just in like a hardwoods bottom, just a beautiful woods that he was in and surrounded by ag. So I'm sure he was just bedding in that hardwoods timber, probably eating on acorns, and then would go out and feed in the cut corn. But again, this one's kind of pristine. There's no chew marks on it. Found it when it was pretty fresh, and just a real big 4-point side, which I like. Big heavy one there. This one down here is kind of cool. I was turkey hunting with my girlfriend in Tennessee, and we were getting on some birds, but it was right around the COVID spring. I think it was the year after COVID, so there's still like a ton of guys hammering public land, a lot of guys out hunting, which, not to get off on a tangent or a side note there, it's even worse now, I'm sure. But anyway, we were kind of getting our teeth kicked in, but getting on birds at the same time, so we were having a good time. But we went to go roost some turkeys, and there was guys just, I remember, up and down this road trying to roost turkeys, and I walked in, I don't know, probably 30-40 yards off the road, and there was some cedars, and this beautiful shed was laying there. So didn't get a turkey on that short trip, but came away with a really nice Tennessee antler. Would love to know what that deer ended up looking like the next season, but a public land shed there, and a nice one at that. So I'm kind of, I guess I got ahead of myself. I forgot to mention this shed that's sitting to my left over here. I keep this here all the time. This is the first shed that I ever found. The very first one, and it's just a giant 3-point side. I hope you guys can see that in the camera, but I was shed hunting with my brother, but we didn't have any clue what we were doing, and we hadn't found any, and this was like I said, our first season even trying to find deer antlers, and we were on our way back to the house, and I still try to do this when I can, but back then, I was really trying to be a good steward of the land, and I still am today, but I just remember any trash I saw, I was picking up the trash and I was putting it in my pocket. Just wanted to keep the land clean and try to help out, when I could. And I remember turning around and saying, oh, there's some trash I'm going to go grab quick. And there was a little drainage creek that was real muddy. And it was actually the very top of this tine, just about that much there, was sticking up out of the mud. And I thought it was a piece of like plastic. So I reached down to grab it, and unbeknownst to me was the rest of a giant antler. So that was my first shed ever, and I thought a cool story too. Maybe he was getting rewarded in a way for picking up trash, I don't know, but that's kind of what set everything into motion, and probably my favorite shed because it, like I said, it was my very first one and kind of had a cool story attached to it. So this was even before we ran trail cameras, so I don't know what this sucker looked like, but I'm guessing he was a pretty cool deer, and I'm betting a mature deer also. A lot of mass on this one, and just a neat shed. So the next one I was going to talk about here, and maybe the last one we share, this shed is from a buck that Jake and I hunted for a few seasons. Was one of those deer that's just a homebody. We saw him a handful of times, had a really nice encounter with him in our food plot once, one morning, and just never grew. Like, he stayed this same size about year after year after year. I thought this rack he was like 4 or 5, just a mature looking body, and like I said, he threw on some mass and stuff, but he just wouldn't really ever grow any tine length or anything crazy. Was just a cool buck though, and was here like year round. We'd get pictures of him all summer, all fall, all winter, and was lucky enough to pick up his left side. Unfortunately, the next year when I really wanted to kill him and I thought he was 5 or 6, he kind of disappeared like middle of November, and then we were going to, I think, put a camera up or check a camera, and we ended up finding him dead. So again, if you can see here, I mean, like, the exact same antler. I mean, he hardly grew. He threw on a little G4 there, but other than that, I mean, his browse the same, just grew the same rack every year, which is kind of cool. I'm glad to have put an end to that story or get some closure there. Just a beautiful dark antlered buck. Again, got a salvage tag or a carcass tag from the game warden for him. And I'll have that memory to look back on and a shed to go with it. But it was one of those stories where you wish you got to put your tag on him, but still glad that you have him at the end of the day. So I forgot I have one more set here. This is my biggest match set of antlers that I have. Just a super tall, really kind of cagey buck. Got big 2s, big G3s, kind of beams that swoop up. And this rack here was the first we had seen this deer. He showed up in the late season and wasn't around much, or so we thought. Ended up finding this side, let's see here, let me make sure I got this right. Yeah, this side on February 7th, this big right side. And after I got to looking back at trail cam pictures, I thought he had kind of disappeared throughout the late season, but I'm pretty sure he just shed kind of early. And we had a bigger, mature looking shed buck that was kind of continually showing up, and I think it ended up being him. He just had lost his rack. I wasn't even shed hunting. I was going once again to like change camera batteries or something, and ended up finding this big side. And then a month later, on March 1st, I was looking for his left side, and I found it probably 100 yards away. He too was in a big hardwoods with a lot of red oaks, and I think it was a pretty good crop that year, and he was just kind of hanging out in there. So we got pictures of him that next fall. And he didn't grow a whole lot, but he was still just like a beast-looking deer. I mean, just a giant-bodied, mature buck, and was really looking forward to hunting him. But like they so often do, I think the last picture we got of him was like late October, maybe early November, but I think late October, and then never saw him again. That's been a few years ago now. So somebody probably got him, is my guess. But, still exciting and fun to hunt, and glad that I have a big set like that. It's always fun when you find a big match set. So that pretty much covers the ones that stick out to me, some of my favorites. Again, just wanted to share a couple stories with you guys. There was another one I wanted to share, but I think I accidentally put it at the bottom of the pile here. It was just my first match set that I ever found. Wasn't a big one, but I had spent years trying to find a match set of antlers, and I just could never match them up. And finally, when I was turkey hunting out of state, I found a match set up on a ridge top, and then after that, it seemed like every year I could match up a couple. So once I broke the ice, it was all it took. But I hope you guys have some luck this spring getting out there and shed hunting. It's always a great way just to enjoy the outdoors, get some miles hiked, which is always healthy and good for you, and then hopefully add to your collection of bone. I will say a recommendation that I have is I started a few years ago just marking all of my antlers with like the date that I found them and the location. It's just a great way to look back, and you can learn from it. You can track deer a lot easier that way. But it's also just fun as you get older, like I did just now in this video, to reminisce, and it takes you right back to that moment, right back to that place, which is pretty special. I'm always scared that over time I'm gonna forget things or lose sight of some of the things that I've done or whatever, and when you mark them, it's always fun, like I said, to look back and relive those moments. So especially when you get a handful of them too, it's easy to get them mixed up and whatnot. So that is my shed collection and some of the few that stand out to me. Like I said, I hope you guys have a lot of fun out in the woods this spring.